Hello, everyone. I'm Hillary Sloan, and this is Driftwood Conversations. My guest today is writer and teacher Steven Cuden, somebody I've known for 45 years. He's the original book and lyrics writer of Jekyll and Hyde, the musical, has written more than 90 teleplays, and hosts the interview podcast Story Beat. What I love most about this conversation is how practical it is. We talk about what it takes to keep creating when you don't feel validated, why blocks might be your mind processing, the difference between form and formula, and why revision is where the art finally shows up. And near the end, we talk about the day we met, the moment Steve says it felt like lightning. Thank you for listening and welcome, Steven. I'm not going to say we're old friends because I'm not going to.
That's too late.
But just we've known each other a long time.
Long time.
Steven Cuden. So introduce yourself. What do you do? Where are you?
So I'm speaking to you from my home in we're Pittsburgh adjacent. I'm in a place called Oakmont, Pennsylvania, where the U.S. Golf Championship was played this past summer. I grew up in the city of Pittsburgh, but I wasn't here for almost 40 years because I was mostly in Hollywood, where I was a screenwriter and wrote 90 teleplays, and I've written a couple of books on how to write. But people know me from having written the original book and lyrics of a musical that's been on Broadway twice called Jekyll and Hyde. And I also do a podcast that I've been doing for almost 9 years called Story Beat with Steve Cuden. And in fact, Hillary's been on my show.
I have. Tell me about the podcast. How did it start?
So that was a kind of a funny thing. In the end of 2016, I knew that there was a movie going to be shot here in Pittsburgh called Last Flag Flying that starred Steve Carell and Lawrence Fishburne and Bryan Cranston. And I knew that a friend of mine that I had long been friends with from college, named Javier Grajeda, who also is one of the stars of Better Call Saul and also Breaking Bad, that Javier was good friends with Bryan Cranston. And so I was teaching screenwriting at Point Park University at the time, and I called my friend Javier and I said, "Do you think that Bryan Cranston would come in to school and talk to our students?" And he said, "I don't know. I'll see." And about 20 minutes later, he texted me back and said he'd be happy to do it. And so the next thing I knew, for the first time in my life, I was interviewing someone, and it wasn't just someone, it was a pretty big star named Bryan Cranston, and had him on stage for an hour in front of 250 students, and I got a taste for interviewing. And then not long after that, the school opened a new facility called the Center for Media Innovation. And in it was a radio/podcast studio. And the man that ran, or still runs the whole center, his name is Andy Conti. And Andy put out a call to the faculty and said, "Would anyone like to do a podcast?" And I thought, I have no idea what to do, but that sounds kind of interesting. It was out of the blue. I wasn't really thinking about it at all. And so I started figuring out, what could I do? Well, I'd written 2 books, one called Beating Broadway and one called Beating Hollywood. And I thought, why don't I do a show that's about creativity and process? And so I came up with a bunch of different titles, and I wound up with Story Beat, which is probably not a perfect title for what the show is, because it's really about creative process. And I talk to artists and creatives and people who are in business but are creative in their life about how they do what they do. So I've learned a whole lot by doing it, as I've done almost 400 episodes of hour-long interviews. It's very interesting to me. And I ask a lot of the same questions because I want to hear different people talking about the same things. I think that's fascinating.
What have you gotten from that?
So when one is a writer, a solo writer like I've been most of my life, though I've collaborated many times, but most of my writing has been by myself. When one writes alone, one isn't sure that what they're doing has any value, or if it's working, or if it's any good, etc. And so that's why most writers have a tendency toward neurosis, because we aren't sure about what we're doing. And should I be doing this? Should I be wasting my time on this? but in fact, you probably should. And so what I came to learn mainly from the show is what I was going through is very similar to what everyone else is going through. And that though there are unique angles on creativity and how you process, we're all actually fairly similar in how we approach it. And it all depends upon your background and your education and how much of the creative work that you've done is, ongoing. And so I think the thing I've learned mostly is the only way to create or be a creative person is to create. That's the only way. You can't go down to the corner store and buy yourself a creative thing that's yours. You have to create it. So the only way to write or to produce or to do art or to any of it is to do it. And I would say that's the biggest lesson I've taken out of the show.
It's interesting. I've been thinking about this a lot. What gets you through those times when you don't have any feedback and you have a lot of doubt?
It's not easy. For me, I have a lot of doubt, even when I'm being given a lot of encouragement. And so the answer is you just, over time, if you've been around long enough, like I have, you come to a realization that the doubts, the downtimes, the uncertainties, you're out of works, all those things are simply a part of the process. And that it's really hard in the beginning of most people's careers. Super hard, because you're not successful. Nobody knows who you are. You have no traction at all. Most people, when they start out in the arts, whatever it is in the arts, they have doubts. They have belief in themselves, perhaps, and maybe they're cocky and arrogant, but somewhere in there they're not sure because nobody's given it any kind of a verification that it's any good. But once you get there and you've done something and people have maybe paid you for your work or they've applauded you for your work, whatever it is, and you continue to do it, over time you relax a little and you come to that understanding that the downtime, the uncertainty, the quote-unquote blocks, though I don't believe in blocks. I think they just feel, people call them blocks, artistic blocks, creative blocks, whatever, that they really aren't. That's just your computer processing. And that if you allow it to process and you don't give up, you might actually arrive at an interesting and good conclusion. When I was at school, I did graduate work at UCLA in screenwriting, and one of the things that they sort of harped on at school was the only people who absolutely are guaranteed to fail are the people who don't try with what they have. That doesn't mean you're going to succeed if you keep at it, but you definitely will fail if you stop. You have to keep going if that's what's in your heart and it's in your gut. I do think that it's super important that people understand that most of the arts are a passion business. If you are not passionate about what you do, the literally hundreds of thousands who are passionate are just going to tromp all over you on their way to whatever they're trying to do. So if you're not it's not burning in your guts to do what you're doing, that's okay. You can always use it as a hobby.
That feeling that this is what I am and I've got to speak, I've got to communicate.
So people have asked me over time, what did I went through a long time, more than a decade, where I wasn't really making any money at my work. People would say to me, why do you keep working at it? And my answer took me a couple of years to figure it out, but the answer to that question is what made them think I had a choice. It's what I do. It's the only thing I know to do. I have to do it. It was absolutely burning a hole in my gut. I was thinking about it 24/7, which can be unhealthy if you're caught by yourself in a room. You have to learn to live with some of that, or else it will eat you up.
You had also different aspects of this career.
Oh, God. Yeah, for a very long time, I thought of myself as a jack of many trades and a master of none. That's what I thought of myself as, that I was good at a lot of things, but I was not a master of any of them, and I certainly wasn't successful at any of them. So I have been, as you well know, because Hillary and I met on a show in Los Angeles in 1981. I don't want to say it too loudly.
I thought it was that far back.
It's 1981, yeah. I was a relatively successful lighting designer in what was called Equity Waiver Theater. I think it's still called Equity Waiver Theater in L.A., which is little theater, 100 seats or less. And it's very hard to make a living at that, but I was very good at it, and people would call me and hire me and pay me close to nothing to light a show. But I got good at it, and I won a lot of awards, and, so what? Because I couldn't eat the awards. So I've done that. Obviously, I know how to teach. I wrote 90 cartoons for kids. Obviously, I've written more than one musical. I have these different skill sets. And so I've gotten good at a couple of them. I am a master now, I think, of a couple of them. And so...
What? Name them for me.
Well, I think I'm a master teacher. I think I am a master scriptwriter. I think I have mastered the understanding of story, which when I first started out, boy, I didn't understand story at all. It was all intuitive, and there is nothing wrong with you being a writer and having only an intuitive understanding of how story works, because most writers don't really understand it academically. And I had a career for 30 years in Los Angeles before I went back to graduate school. And so I was in my 50s when I went to grad school. I thought, I'm going to take this, I'm going to do grad school, because I think as my career, which happens to many writers in LA, my career was leaking oil, where it was getting harder and harder to get hired as you age. I thought, well, I think I would be a decent teacher, but I'm going to need a degree in order to work in a university. And so that's when I went back to school at UCLA. And I thought, they're not going to teach me anything. I've had this 30-year career. I know everything there is to know. I could not have been more wrong in my life. They taught me so much there. And it was the academic look at how story works. Storytelling has a very specific form to it. A form, not a formula. And I teach the difference between form and formula, because people think, oh, it's a formula. Well, it's not. Aristotle, going back 2,800 years, didn't teach a formula. He taught beginning, middle, and end in the Poetics. And if you read Aristotle, you'll say, okay, well, this is kind of obtuse. But it isn't. It's everything, because where you start a story, how the story proceeds, and how it ends, beginning, middle, and end, are everything. It's critical. Otherwise, you don't really have a story. You just have a bunch of words babbling together, like I'm doing right now. But
I'm very interested, particularly in the idea of story, because that comes up a lot in my podcast.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's how we talk to each other. We communicate. People say to you, how was your day? What did you do today? Well, they're asking you to tell them a story. And the story needs to have a beginning, middle, and end. If somebody walked up to you and said, I got to tell you what happened to me today. You say, great, tell me what happened. And they say, parking space. You go, what does that mean? That doesn't mean anything. Well, that was the end of the story. They found a parking space, right? So you need a beginning, middle, and end in order to tell a story. And our nightly news, the nightly news, what do? They tell you tonight's top stories. They're all stories. It is how we as humans actually talk to communicate with each other through storytelling.
Okay, I have a question. Because, that's been a thing for me over the years, is beginning, middle, and end. Mm-hmm. I fought with that for a while. Now I'm fine with it. But somebody like, Robert Wilson, conceptual art, conceptual theater, how does that play in? So
when you sit down in the theater, it starts somewhere. We teach a concept called in medias res. When you write a story or a screenplay or a play or a musical, when you do something storytelling-wise, it is best, it's most successful when you start in medias res, which means in the middle. So you don't start a story before the story starts. In other words, this is part of Aristotle, it goes all the way back. You can, but you probably don't want to start that story at the conception of that character's birth, the conception of their how they're conceived, and then their birth, and what they did as children, and then as they went through high school. You don't want to go through all that. You want to start in the middle of something, usually in the middle of something intense and active. And so By doing that, you've already grabbed the audience by the shirt collar and said, come here, watch this. And if you don't do that, the audience is going to likely get bored quickly. You can get away with a multitude of sins in story just by being entertaining. If you're boring, you're going to lose the audience for sure. Going back to what we're talking about, you need to start in the middle of something happening for your protagonist, usually. Not always. Robert Wilson is a conceptual artist.
Was.
He's
passed, yeah.
Well, I say is as his work is still there, but yes, he's passed. The conceptual art still adheres to a form. If you would like me to explain the difference between form and formula, I'd be happy to.
Sure, go ahead.
So a form is something that is repetitive. So when you have and when I teach, I like to put up different buildings. I put up the Eiffel Tower, I put up the White House, I put up a doghouse, I put up an apartment building, an office building, I put up different buildings. And I say to the students, what are the similarities between all these? And we'll start to list them. So you've got windows and doors and walls and roofs and certain building materials, and you've got foundation, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, but how do you know that each one is different? How can you identify that all those similarities come together in a different look so that you can say, that's the White House, that's the Eiffel Tower? There is no formula to that. That's a form. The form is called a building. So when you go to a movie and it's a detective story, we've all seen detective stories, right? And we know that that character is going to be hunting for those characters because he or she is a detective. But it's not a formula. It's a form. The form is called detective story, or a genre called detective story. Robert Wilson was creating conceptual art that was the form of conceptual art, but there was no formula to his work. He was working in a way that challenged what we think of as traditional Western storytelling. It's certainly not Hollywood, and it's certainly not TV. He was known for it, much like the way that Jackson Pollock challenged the form of art when he created his various paintings, that people had not seen anything like that before. So it challenges the form, but the form is still there. If I went and put cameras up in front of a Robert Wilson opera and I recorded that opera, and that was then frozen in time within that video or film, and then you could show it over and over again, the repetitive showing of that is actually a formula. But his work followed no formula at all. But yet, when you sat down at a Robert Wilson play or opera, whatever it was, you had to start somewhere, it had to go somewhere, and it had to end somewhere, or else you'd still be sitting there, right?
So I can hear the teacher in you.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
What's your class? Is it for screenwriters?
I'm retired now, but when I was teaching, I taught 11 different courses.
Wow.
Yeah, so I could teach, and some of them had similarities to them because they would be, if you're teaching a screenwriting class, you're starting at intro to screenwriting, you're going to intermediate screenwriting, you're going to advanced screenwriting, you're going to senior thesis, you're still writing scripts. So they have similarities to them because what you're doing is the same goal, only they get a little more intense and a little more advanced. But I also taught acting and directing for writers, and I taught animation writing. I taught different kinds of classes. So yes, I've become a teacher over time, and I don't mean to be pedantic, but here I am.
No, I wish I was taking your class.
I wish you were too.
That would be really fun, actually. So you're retired now. You're not teaching?
I stopped teaching in 2020. I put in my retirement in January of 2020, and then the pandemic hit 2 months later, and everybody said, "How did you know?" And I said, I didn't. It was just that was time to go. I had had enough. I'd had enough of the grind. You know what? I loved the teaching part of academia. I was not overly fond of the administrative part of academia, because when you're in it, there's a lot of it. There's at least half or more of it is some kind of administration. It's not the classroom part of it. That's enjoyable. The rest of it is not all that interesting to me, and I did it for 10 years, had tenure and all those good things, and it was just time for me to go. I still teach. I just don't teach in a formal setting. So this that we're doing right now, I guess, is a form of teaching. I I do have consulting clients. I do consult with people. They come to me and they say, will you read my work and tell me whether it's working or not and what we can do to make it better? And I do that. So that's a form of teaching. I teach through my books. So that's still teaching. But I'm not in a formal academic setting anymore.
Tell me about the books you've written, the titles and what they're about.
So Beating Broadway was the first book I wrote. I think I published it in 2013. The full title is Beating Broadway: How to Create Stories for Musicals That Get Standing Ovations. The one show that I'm known for, Jekyll and Hyde, I've seen it, I don't know, probably 100 times. And I've never, knock wood, I've never seen a performance of it where people didn't stand up at the end, like enthusiastically stand up with a standing ovation. That book is about the process, again, we're back to the word process, of creating the story that it underpins most musicals. The old adage is, in a musical, if the audience comes out singing the songs, they will remember the composer. If the audience comes out singing the lights, meaning they hated what they saw, they will blame the book writer. So the book writer is always short-shrifted. And it's usually the book of a musical, because all great musicals, with a few exceptions, all great musicals are really great stories. And they otherwise would just be concerts. You don't need the story to have a concert where you have wonderful music playing. In order for it to become a stage musical, you need the underlying, for lack of a better word, play. You need the script. You need a story. You need characters in conflict with other characters, which is the underpinning of all stories. And without that, you just have songs and people milling around. Beating Broadway is about how to find and create stories. Now, the thing that I did in the book that's unique, and I don't know of any other example of it, is the first third of the book is, here's the process you go through to create a story. It's not about the mechanics of writing scripts. It's not about how you put it on the page. It's how you come up with a story. It's how you develop a story with characters. The last 2/3 of the book, I took 40 well-known, memorable, popular musicals, and I broke them down into their narrative beats and plot points and structure. So a writer can come along and look at the structure of any one of these 40 musicals. If they think their story is similar structurally, because structure is part of the form of writing a musical, and they can look at that form and they can see this structure is this way in that show. Oh, okay, so I'm just going to plug my thinking into this form. Again, the form is everywhere. The formula is something you want to avoid. I did the same thing in my second book, which is called Beating Hollywood: Tips for Creating Unforgettable Screenplays, in which the first third of the book is about how do you develop stories for screenplays, teleplays. And the last 2/3 of the book, I took 40 memorable, popular movies and broke them down into their narrative beats and plot points. So each of them are around 500 pages, and there's a lot of stuff in there. The last 2/3 are not what I would call reading material. They're reference material.
So you don't know this, but because I just started it, but I'm writing a book.
Oh, good for you.
It's
Yay.
Fiction, and I'm not going to say too much about it at this point because it's being developed. How would I start developing a story, particularly if I want to weave time in and out?
Now you're talking about a time-tripping story?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's probably the most difficult thing of all to do. Naturally, my dear friend Hilary Sloan would bite off the biggest chunk she could chew. The most difficult thing you can possibly think of to do. So I've written one cartoon that was a time-slipping story. It was really hard to do. This is the other thing that I've learned from doing my show for 9 years. There is an endless way to come at this thing. There is no one right way to any of it. There are many successful ways. They are individual. They have their own quirks and their own ways of doing things. I think that generally speaking, and I'm being very general, there are two major ways to look at story development. One is by creating the characters first and allowing them to dictate how their story should go. And the second way is develop the story and to then find characters that work within that. Those are the two main ways that people come at storytelling. either character development first or plot first. It depends upon what you're doing. If you're writing, I go back to the example, if you're writing a detective story, I'm sure it's been done, but I think you'd be hard pressed to just start writing a detective story not knowing where it's going. You need to figure that out and know where the end of the story is so you can get there from the beginning. But there are lots and lots and lots of novels, and frankly, probably a certain number of screenplays that are written where the author does not have any idea where they're going when they start. I, on the other hand, believe, personally, it's just more my comfort level, I like to know exactly where I'm going. I'm the kind of person, when I get in my car, I don't just like to randomly drive around. I like to have a goal, and if the goal is a long trip like a novel would be or like a screenplay would be, I like to know where I'm going. So that means I'm an outliner. I think most writers are outliners, though there are plenty of them that are not. And I've talked to many of them on my show that are not outliners, and I'm always surprised that they've had any success at all, and yet they have. And that's just the way it is. I think that the outline is the ideal way to find the roadmap upon which you can take your trip of writing something. There's nothing, absolutely nothing, holding you to that outline as you write. You can always diverge. You can change. You can go back and scrap it all and start over again. But I think not having that roadmap is, for me, not just intimidating. I don't know how to do it. I need to sit down and work that out first. That said, when I started my career, I used to think of plot first and then put the characters in the story. I now have come all the way around to where I think I need the characters first and the plot to follow what the characters' lives in the story are doing. That's a big distinction, to have the plot first versus the characters first. Every project is its own thing. One of the things that I do know at this point is I'm always going to follow the classic storytelling form. That's comfortable for me. And at this point, I've never gone outside of that comfort level, and maybe I should, but I never have. You will never know that I'm using the form unless you're really, really digging in and paying attention, which most people don't.
So you were telling me earlier how you feel really at home where you are. And how did that all happen? You went back to where you grew up?
I grew up here in Pittsburgh, as I think I said earlier, and left town when I was 17 and went off to school at the University of Wisconsin for 3 years. And then I transferred to University of Southern California in LA and graduated from there with a degree, a BA in the theater. I mean, that's a perfect example of a degree that is worth barely the piece of paper it's written on. And it doesn't matter where you've gone to school, it matters how you've applied yourself at school, because the degree doesn't entitle you to anything, and it's no real advantage unless you have gone to school and taken advantage of what they're giving you. And then you can go out and try to make good on that degree by trying to have a career out of it. So I was in LA for 35 years. The whole thing was close to 40 years that I had left town in Pittsburgh. And then I was offered to teach screenwriting at Point Park University here in Pittsburgh. And that was about 14 years ago. I took the offer because I had kind of had enough of LA. And I had never, what we were talking about earlier is I was there for 35 years. I was married and divorced there. I met you there. I met all kinds of good friends there. I owned 3 houses there. I had a career there, blah, 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 blah. And yet it never, ever felt like home to me. Pittsburgh always felt like home. Now, why is that? I don't know. Part of it is that there are 4 seasons here, and I love the 4 seasons. I really, really, in LA, missed what we call fall here in Pittsburgh, what we call fall in the East. I don't mind winter. I don't have a problem with the cold. I might have mentioned to you earlier, I do have a problem with ice. Ice bothers me, but the rest of it I can handle. You just bundle up properly. You layer properly. Pittsburgh is just, it's familiar. I still have friends here. I had, when I moved back, family here, but they've now gone on. there's something about the culture of Pittsburgh. There's a Pittsburgh attitude. It's easier to drive around here than it is in Los Angeles, which is impossible to drive in. And there's lots of rich culture here. There are so many great theaters and lots of shows that come in from out of town and tons of music of every variety you can imagine and all kinds of cultural events and various wonderful museums. We've got 3 or 4 or 5 outstanding museums. I'm just happier here. Being where I feel truly comfortable, and it feels like home. But I do think that home for every individual is what makes them comfortable. I have lots of friends that live in New York City, in Manhattan, and I think to myself, I could not live in Manhattan. It's a perfect place to visit for 3 days, but I can't take the hubbub and the noise and the energy. There's too much energy. Too much energy in New York. There's a weird energy in Los Angeles. You pointed it out when we first met, and I didn't get it at all. I mean, I talk about being wet behind the ears. I didn't understand it. But there's a really weird energy in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I've been out of LA now 16 years.
Mm-hmm. But you're close enough.
Well, I'm close, but this is another world. This
Sure
is another planet.
Sure it
is. We call it, when anything happens that doesn't quite mesh up, doesn't quite work, we go, well, it's Joshua Tree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it's funny, even though I know I couldn't live in New York anymore, New York's home. New York will always be home.
So how often do you get back there to visit?
I haven't been back there now in about, 10, 12 years.
Wow, okay.
And I don't know that I need to go there, but in my heart, where I anchor, it's New York.
Well,
when I have dreams, it's New York.
Well, you have New York energy.
Yes, I do.
You're not a. You're a relatively laid back person, but you're not really a laid back person. There's a lot of energy going on in you.
Oh yes. And
I can handle it, but I don't like it. I don't like all the intensity of it. New York's
You're
intense.
not talking about me now.
No.
Yeah.
No, I can take.
That's great.
I find I can take New York in little doses. I don't think I would do well if I lived there. I think I'd be stressed out all the time. And
it's very hard. When I was back there when my uncle got sick and I was taking care of him, there were so many things that were difficult. I had hurt my leg, and trying to get through this city with the uneven sidewalks and the subways, and it was hellish, actually.
And the people, lots of people.
Too many people.
Yeah, it's too many people. Well, it's the same thing in LA, too many people. And that's wonderful if that's what you are comfortable in. And it's wonderful if that's where your career is. So I couldn't have done my career such that it was anywhere but Los Angeles. I had to be there. And so I'm glad I did it. I don't have any regrets about it whatsoever. I'm just happier where I am now. I'm more comfortable where I am now. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Do you have any project plans for the future?
Oh yes. Some of which I can't really talk about, but yes, I'm actually in development on 3 new musicals.
Wow.
And 2 of them, one is an adaptation of a movie. I can't tell you what any of the 3 are at the moment, but one is, and all 3 are with different producers. 2 are with one producer. One is with a different producer. One is an adaptation of a movie that almost nobody's ever heard of, and 2 of them are with very famous, super famous. Either one is a rock band, and the other is a famous rock composer. And so, like if you know the musical Mamma Mia, in which the musical Mamma Mia is the music of ABBA, but there's no reference to ABBA in the musical. It's not their story. It's not a bio story. It's a whole cloth new story using their music. And both of the musicals I'm working on with the rock composers are that. They're unique stories that I'm creating out of their music. as if it had
Interesting.
never been written before.
I was thinking, when you were talking earlier, I was thinking about I guess it's an opera, Tommy.
It's a rock
know,
opera.
It's rock opera. And that was an interesting story.
Now, mind you, they wrote that as a story.
Yes.
So that started that way. I mean, Pete Townsend wrote that with a story in mind, the story of Tommy. So that was sort of a natural and relatively, I use that word purposefully, easy transition from the albums into the stage show. Not easy, just relatively easy compared to you have nothing, you have no music and no story, and now go make a musical. That's hard. That's maybe for my taste, that's the highest mountain to climb in the creation world, is to go from, I should qualify that, the creation world in the theater. The highest mountain to climb for me is you have no story and no music. Now write a musical. That's
the blank page for, if you're writing a book.
But I think that blank page in a book is a very high bar. But I think when you suddenly have to then create music and lyrics that are in context with character, that bar gets much higher. That's how I see it. It's just much higher. It's relative. Again, there's that word, relatively easy to write a whole lot of sentences that lead to a story. It's much more difficult to write a whole lot of sentences and music and lyrics in character that continue to tell that story. That's much harder.
Yeah. I don't know. I've never done a theater piece, but even creating a book from the blank page, it's hard.
Oh no, I'm not trying to put it down.
Yeah.
It is hard. It's all of it's hard.
Yes.
And why should anyone pay any attention to any of us? Why? Why should anyone pay any attention to any of us? We have to do something to make it compelling and interesting and entertaining. And if we don't, then that's on us if no one's interested. So it's really difficult. All of the arts are difficult.
But even putting that distinction on it, if people pay attention, because there's been incredible art created that was beyond its time.
Absolutely. Well,
and that
Van Gogh.
That's who I was thinking about. So that's been a interesting point for me. How do you keep going when you don't know what you're doing?
It's back to what I said earlier, which is, do you have a choice? Is this something you must do, whether anybody pays you or not? And if it's something you must do, then you must do it. And if you have the time, the energy, the resources, the wherewithal, and the desire, and the passion for it, then do it. If you are in a circumstance, and there are lots of artists that are in the circumstance of, I have no money, I'm working my ass off every day at some horrible job just to keep afloat. There are tons of artists like this in all the arts. And I don't have the energy at the end of the day to create. So there are the numbers of stories of successful creative people who went through something like that, where they had to battle through not having any connections to anybody in the world they were trying to be in, not having any money, not having any time. They had to dig very deep and find the time, because the time is the one resource that is totally perishable. And if you don't use your time wisely, it goes away, and then you've lost it. So most people who are in those circumstances, you hear story after story. Oh, I had to get up an hour earlier of the family or wherever I'm living, or I had to stay up later, or I had to sneak an hour in during the middle of the day, or whatever it is they do. They find a way to shoehorn more time into their day. And that's, if you are compelled to create, then you're going to create. That's why I say, as I said also earlier, if you stop, you will not succeed. There's no way for you to succeed if you stop. Look at Van Gogh. I mean, I think he was the legendarily sold one painting in his life. But he never stopped painting. He was a little, I would say, not in his right mind at the end. He was still painting. It's what he was compelled to do. He couldn't help himself. That's where you find the breakthroughs are in people that just are doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it. That's where the breakthroughs all come, in science, in art, in all of it, medicine, all of it.
Artists, it's an incredible, I don't even know what to call it, personality trait or devotion. Driven. Religion, spirituality.
Listen, being an artist is almost exclusively a self-disciplined thing. Even if you're working in a group, let's say you're working in a dance company, and you're a part of a dance company, you still have to be self-disciplined to get up and take care of your body and to do all the right things to be part of that group. There's a discipline to it. And if you don't have that discipline, things might break down on you physically, things might not work for you, you may not keep the suppleness of your dancer's body, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a discipline to being an artist of any kind.
What's the difference for you between being an artist and being a creative? Or is there a difference?
I think that's a difference without a distinction. I think that if you're an artist, you are creative, and if you're a creative, you're an artist. And let me take that step further. I think that art, for me personally, gets carried beyond what we think of as the traditional arts. So you've got painters and sculptors and composers and writers and actors and producers, etc. Those are artists, right? But, for instance, I have had on my show lawyers, I've had unit production managers, I have had people that are in and around the arts that have to be creative in their work. So I think that the really successful business people of the world, the really successful doctors, the successful lawyers, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You can approach your work in a creative way. And that makes you a kind of artist that probably won't be called an artist in society, but I think they're an artist. And I think that life, here's something that I would never have said when I first met you. It wouldn't have been part of the germination in my head. I think that life itself is a form of art. Now, there are people, and I know you know them, and I think maybe you're one of them. There are people who live an artistic life. Everything you do has an artistic point of view, and you come at everything you do from a creative standpoint. I'm not that. I have my less artsy time, and I kind of need that in order to do the other. I need the time away so that I get perspective.
Yeah, that's a whole conversation. That's so interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's something I've really looked at. And also, I've started to do gatherings with Driftwood Conversations, local gatherings from people to get together. We've had one so far with 20 people, and we're talking about things, creating a new community, a new communication. As things are breaking down in the world, we're trying to find new ways of interacting and being together.
It's the Hillary Sloan Salon.
Yes. I've always wanted that.
Well, Sloan is actually, but you got the E on the end, but Sloan is actually an acronym for, what would the right word be? But it's salon with Sloan.
Oh, how perfect.
Perfect. See? You could make salon with an E on the end.
Add a little to it. But, how do we, bringing in ideas, how do we support each other? Mm-hmm. How do we bring consciousness to what we do? I mean, there's so many levels of that conversation. We could go deeper and deeper.
Well, and that I certainly recall, it is very much a part and parcel of who you are, is that the consciousness, the spirituality, the other layers that are not obvious on the surface, what's beneath. That's part of who you are, for sure.
Yes.
I have had a career where it was much more surfacey. Much more.
Do you feel it's that now, or you have the opportunity to go deeper?
Here's going back a half a question or two. You asked what projects I'm working on. I have a project in my head. It is not well formed, but it's sitting there, bugging me all day long. Steve, look at this. Think about that. And it's for the first time in my life, in my career, I'm actually thinking about writing something that has a personal undertow. Almost nothing that I've written, everything that a writer writes has some personal aspect to it. Everything. It's impossible because you're writing from your perspective, from your point of view. But there are writers who write about themselves, even if they put other characters in it. And I never have. I've never intentionally written my story. And I'm thinking about how to do that now for the first time at this point in my life, which is 7 decades in. So that's an interesting place to be for me because it's a little uncomfortable because it's not what I've done. It's not what I'm comfortable with. So now I have to get through that, get past my discomfort in order to come to something perhaps new for me, which I'm hoping to do. Let's put it that way.
I think that is part of the arts.
Absolutely.
Is always facing with a discomfort. It might not be as big as writing a memoir or whatever.
Right.
Or something you've never done before. But every time you walk into a new project, there's a bit of discomfort.
Oh, for sure. And if you're not comfortable with discomfort, you'll be chased away. So yes, you have to be comfortable with a lack of comfort in something new. And that's what, there are many phrases for it, but the one that I really like is the tyranny of the blank page. So when you have that blank page, you're creating something new every time. So what you hope for is that you get stronger and stronger muscles of what you're doing over a long time of doing it. And the more that you write, or the more that you paint, or the more that you direct, or the more that you create sculpture, you kind of have a muscle memory that begins to develop. And I think the thing that happens more than not is you learn over a long period of time on a new project the things not to do, that you've already tried those and they don't work in one way, shape, or form. So now you're in the uncomfortable place of trying to push forward on something you've never tried before. So that's what's uncomfortable. But you already have the experience of, I've tried to do that and it didn't work for me. So I'm not going to do that again unless, and here's the cute part, unless somehow what you tried to do in the past that didn't work comes back all the way around and you now have an epiphany and you see how to make it work.
Or you have the passion to push through it.
Well,
you may not have the answers.
Frequently, you don't have the answers. You have to push through it. I'm a great believer in revision. I think of, and in fact, I teach that. I say to students, did you ever work with clay in school? And everybody worked with clay. Everybody was given clay at some point in grade school. And you get this misshapen lump of something, and you're told to make something out of it. So you make an ashtray, or you make a little man, or whatever it is that you make. But then you're then given tools, little fine tools, to take that misshapen, lumpy stuff and to smooth it out and to refine it and to work with it. So I describe the act of your first draft. I don't know if you've ever read Annie Lamott's book, Bird by Bird.
Bird by Bird, of course.
Okay, so she has a fantastic chapter in it called Shitty First Drafts. And yes. I'm a great believer in revision. I don't believe that anybody has ever actually produced a first draft, no changes to it whatsoever, and off you go to the races and you're producing it. No, I don't think that's ever happened. There's always revisions. I'm a great reviser. And so I describe the first draft as you are creating the misshapen, lumpy clay. And now you can take that and form that clay into something beautiful by refining, by revising. So the first draft is, I think of as largely craft, though craft continues through, and that the refinement is where you find the art. So you need those two. That's why it's an art and a craft, because you have to understand the craft of writing. How do you form a sentence? What's the order of the words in that sentence, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, you are going to create all of it, but you need that first messy, sloppy, lumpy thing. And so don't worry about it. That's the lesson there. Don't worry about it on your first draft. Let it fly.
So we have gone over or close to an hour. Couple of questions as we wrap it up. What would you tell Steve, little Steve, if you ran into him now?
I'm still little Steve. What would I tell him?
What wisdom would you give yourself if you met your child?
Chill out and relax. Don't be so freaking hard on yourself. That's what I would tell young me is if you just keep at it, it will happen, because that's what you're willing to stick to it, that you're willing to be determined and you're willing to continue to drive through. But when you're at that first phases, there's so much uncertainty, and so the stress of that is pretty hard to deal with. It was for me. Some people are better at dealing with it than I am. I'm not good at dealing with it. And so I would say to me way back when, relax, just keep working at it. Give yourself a chance to let it out there and breathe. That was the lesson that I had to learn.
And have you learned that?
Mostly.
Okay.
I'm still me. I'm a very different person than when we first met. I'm a really different person.
Well,
we all are.
quite a deal older.
Yes, we are. We're quite 45 years older. So I think that I am still slightly full of neurosis and anxiety because that's who I am. But I've gotten way, way better at handling it and dealing with it and absorbing it into my life, and in some ways using it, where at first you don't really know how to use it. Now I can kind of add it into what my thinking is, and I can absorb it. So yes, I'm let's call it 90% less full of anxiety.
Well, the wonderful thing is that as long as we've known each other, and there's been periods of time where we haven't seen each other or communicated, we just pick up like it was yesterday.
Just like yesterday. That's correct. And I in life I have maybe 3 or 4 people like that I've known that you don't know any of them, but they're people that I'm friendly with. We're super tight for a period of time, then we go apart for years, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it is. Then we reconnect, and it's just like we were right back where we started, or where we left off, I should say. So yeah, that's correct.
So I have a partner that I'm living with, and I was trying to explain to him how long we've known each other and who we were to each other, and it was hard. He just kept giving me funny looks. Okay.
Well, okay. So when we first met, I'm going to say it's going to be recorded now for posterity. When we first met, something happened that day that had never happened to me before, and it has never happened to me since. Okay?
Yes.
When we met, it was in, I believe, the Pan Andreas Theater. We were going to do a show called Pièce de Résistance.
Right. I couldn't remember the
name. The director was Abraham Polonsky, who was famous for being one of the Hollywood 10. I believe he was one of the Hollywood 10, or he was part of the Blacklist, whatever it was. And he had written Body and Soul, and he had written some huge movies. Tell Him Willie Boy Is Here. But when we met in that theater, and it was in, I believe, late spring of 1981. And when I shook your hand, there was an electrical connection that I had never felt before, and I have never felt since. It was absolutely like lightning had gone off.
I remember you telling me that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's never happened to me again. Never had that. I thought that was going to happen all the time after that. That's never happened again.
Well, that could be good. It could be real earth-shattering.
Well, if I was shattered, I'm put back together.
Good. I don't know about me. The earth-shattering, I go through often.
You do. I'm sure you do.
I do. I'm a little neurotic too, but I'm used to it now.
You've grown into your own skin.
Yes. I think we both have, and that's lovely.
It is lovely.
And that's the wonderful thing about maturity.
Well, yeah. Age gives you a certain degree of perspective and wisdom.
Yeah, hopefully.
It's sometimes a pain in the ass to get here, but
Yeah. Anyway, Stephen, thank you so much.
thank you.
This was really fun. This conversation has been special because it's carried by friendship, one that has held time, distance, and very different creative paths. What it reveals is the shape of our artistic life itself. You keep showing up, you revise again and again, and you make room for the uncomfortable moments, knowing they're not obstacles, but part of the work. If you want more of Steve's wisdom and conversations with writers, filmmakers, and other creatives, you can find his podcast, Story Beat, wherever you listen. And his books are Beating Broadway and Beating Hollywood, both focused on story development and structure. If this episode inspired you, share it with a friend. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, a quick rating or review helps reach new listeners. I'm Hillary Sloan, and this is Driftwood Conversations. Thank you for listening and for being part of the community.